Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to tell you something most financial experts won't admit because it undermines their entire business model. You don't need much money to live well. In fact, most people who think they need six figures to survive are just mathematically illiterate about their own lives. They've confused lifestyle inflation with actual necessity, and that confusion costs them decades of freedom. I've watched this pattern repeat for 70 years. People earn more and somehow need more. They get a raise and immediately find new ways to be broke. They think the problem is income when the real problem is they can't control themselves. You can't outrun stupidity with a bigger paycheck. Let me be direct. Living on a low income isn't about deprivation. It's about clarity. It's about understanding what actually matters versus what you've been sold. Most people have never sat down and calculated what they truly need to live comfortably. They just absorb society's expectations and call it reality. That's expensive ignorance. When I was young, I learned a principle that changed everything. The formula for misery is to have rising expectations. If your expectations rise as fast as your income, you're trapped forever. But if you can keep your needs stable while your income grows, that gap becomes freedom. That gap is where wealth lives. Most people do the opposite. They let their lifestyle expand instantly with every dollar they earn. New car, bigger apartment, fancier restaurants, more subscriptions, more obligations. They think they're moving up. They're just moving sideways on a more expensive treadmill. Here's the mathematics nobody wants to face. If you earn $40,000 and spend $40,000, you're broke. If you earn $200,000 and spend $200,000, you're still broke, just with nicer furniture. The number doesn't matter. The gap matters, and you create that gap by mastering your expenses, not by chasing income. Now, let me tell you what living on a low income actually requires. It requires intellectual honesty about needs versus wants. Most of what people call needs are actually wants that have been normalized by marketing. You don't need a new car. You need reliable transportation. You don't need a big house. You need shelter. You don't need expensive clothes. You need to be covered. Once you separate actual needs from socialized wants, the required income drops dramatically. But this separation requires psychological strength most people don't have. They can't stand being different. They can't tolerate looking poor while building wealth. Social proof is one of the strongest human tendencies, and it's financially catastrophic. Everyone around you is spending stupidly, so you spend stupidly too. You mistake the herd's direction for wisdom when it's usually just collective delusion. Let me give you the framework for living well on very little. First principle is housing. This is where most people destroy themselves financially. They buy or rent far more space than they need because they're trying to signal status. A couple doesn't need 3 bedrooms. A single person doesn't need 2. But people convince themselves they do because they might have guests, or they need an office, or they want to feel successful. That's not planning. That's paying premium prices for ego. Here's what I learned in my 20s. Your housing should be the cheapest acceptable option that meets your actual requirements, not your aspirational requirements, your actual ones. Can you sleep safely? Can you store your possessions? Can you maintain basic hygiene? That's the threshold. Anything beyond that is luxury, which is fine if you can afford luxury. But if you're trying to live on limited income, luxury is a tax on your future. When Warren and I were young, clear as throat, we lived in small, modest places, not because we were poor, though we didn't have much, but because we understood opportunity cost. Every dollar spent on excess housing was a dollar that couldn't compound. We were willing to look modest to become secure. Most people make the opposite trade. Second principle is transportation. Cars are wealth destroyers. Not because you need transportation, but because people buy far more car than they need. They finance vehicles that depreciate faster than they can pay them off. They buy new when used would work perfectly. They upgrade every few years for no rational reason. If you're trying to live on low income, you need to be ruthless about transportation. Buy used, buy reliable, buy boring. A 10-year-old Toyota will get you everywhere a new BMW will, but it costs a fraction and doesn't announce to the world that you make poor financial decisions. The real cost of a car isn't the purchase price. It's the insurance, fuel, maintenance, registration, and opportunity cost of the capital tied up in a depreciating asset. When you calculate the true costs, most people are spending 20 to 30% of their income on transportation. That's insane. Cut that in half, and you've just given yourself a massive raise without earning another dollar. Third principle is food. This is where small daily decisions compound into large annual costs. People don't realize how much they spend eating out, ordering delivery, buying prepared foods. They think it's convenient. It's also expensive. If you're serious about living on limited income, you cook, not sometimes, consistently. You meal plan, you buy ingredients, not meals. You accept that convenience costs money you don't have to spend. I'm not suggesting you eat poorly, I'm suggesting you eat intelligently. Rice, beans, vegetables, eggs, chicken, basic. Staples, nutritious, cheap, and if you learn to cook, quite enjoyable. The difference between eating out regularly and cooking at home is easily thousands of dollars per year. For someone on a low income, that's not a small difference. That's transformative. Fourth principle is entertainment. Modern life has convinced people they need constant stimulation. Streaming services, concerts, bars, events, travel, all of it marketed as essential to a full life. It's not. Entertainment is fine. Entertainment addiction is poverty. There's a massive difference between occasionally enjoying yourself and structuring your entire life around consumption-based pleasure. You don't need Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, and HBO. You don't need to go out every weekend. You don't need to travel internationally to prove you're living well. What you need is the intellectual honesty to admit that most entertainment is just distraction from a life you don't actually enjoy. When your life has meaning, you don't need as much distraction. When your days have purpose, you don't need constant external stimulation. But people have built lives so empty that without purchased entertainment, they'd have to face themselves. That's expensive therapy. The alternative is building a life that's internally satisfying. Reading costs almost nothing. Walking costs nothing. Conversations cost nothing. Thinking costs nothing. Learning costs nothing if you use libraries and free resources. These aren't deprivation. They're often more satisfying than the expensive alternatives because they engage your mind instead of numbing it. Fifth principle is clothing. You don't need much. You need clean, presentable, durable clothing. Not fashionable, not branded, not new every season. When you stop trying to communicate status through clothing, the required expenditure drops to almost nothing by quality basics that last. Ignore fashion. Wear things until they're actually worn out, not just out of style. The wealthy understand this. They often wear the same thing repeatedly because they're not trying to prove anything. It's the insecure middle class that needs new outfits constantly. Real confidence doesn't require external validation. Sixth principle is subscriptions and recurring costs. This is the slow bleed that kills financial health. Gym memberships you don't use, subscription boxes you forget about, streaming services you barely watch, software you don't need, insurance you're overbuying. Every recurring cost is a permanent claim on your future income. It's a promise you've made to keep paying regardless of whether you're getting value. Audit every subscription. Cancel ruthlessly. If you're not using it weekly, you don't need it. Most people are spending hundreds per month on recurring costs they barely think about. That's thousands per year. For someone on low income, that could be 2 months of living expenses. Seventh principle is social pressure. This is the hardest one because it's psychological, not mathematical. Your friends will pressure you to spend. Your family will judge your choices. Society will treat frugality as failure. You have to develop immunity to this or you'll break. People who successfully live on low income have strong internal locus of control. They don't need external approval. They don't measure their worth by consumption. They can watch others spend foolishly without feeling compelled to join. That psychological strength is more valuable than any financial technique because techniques are useless if you lack the discipline to execute them. And discipline requires not caring what others think. Eighth principle is debt avoidance. If you're living on low income, debt is poison. There's no exception to this. You cannot afford to pay interest on anything, not CR, credit cards, not personal loans, not payment plans. If you can't pay cash, you can't afford it, period. The math is simple. Every dollar you pay in interest is a dollar that can't be used for actual living or future investment. Interest is the penalty for impatience. And when you're living on limited resources, impatience is catastrophic. Most people living paycheck to paycheck are there because they borrowed their way into it. They finance consumption. Now they're paying for past decisions instead of funding present needs. That's the debt trap. Once you're in it, it's incredibly hard to escape because every dollar goes to interest instead of principal. The solution is stark. Don't enter. If you're already in, get out at any cost. Cut everything, work extra, sell possessions, do whatever it takes because debt is financial quicksand. The longer you stay in, the deeper you sink. Ninth principle is emergency reserves. Even on low income, especially on low income, you need emergency savings. Life will hit you with unexpected costs, car repairs, medical bills, job loss, appliances breaking. If you don't have reserves, these emergencies become catastrophes. You go into debt. You miss payments. You spiral. The way to build emergency reserves on low income is to treat savings as a non-negotiable expense. Pay yourself first, even if it's $20 a month, even if it feels pointless. You're building a habit and a cushion. Start with $500, then a 0, 0, 0, 0, then 3 months of expenses. This takes time, but it's achievable if you're disciplined about the other principles. Every dollar you're not wasting on unnecessary housing, transportation, food, and entertainment can go here. And once you have a cushion, life becomes psychologically different. You stop living in constant anxiety. You have margin. Margin is everything. 10th principle is income maximization within reason. Living on low income doesn't mean accepting low income forever. It means managing what you have while working to improve it. But income maximization has to be intelligent. You can't sacrifice your health, family, or sanity just to earn more. That's trading one problem for another. The goal is to find work that's sustainable and pays enough to meet your needs plus savings. For most people, that's more achievable than they think. The problem is they've inflated their needs to the point where no reasonable income suffices. But if you've applied the other 9 principles, your needs are low enough that modest income works. From there, you invest the surplus, even small amounts, even 10% of a small income, because the goal isn't to live on low income forever. The goal is to build assets that eventually generate income independent of your labor. That's the path from clear throat survival to freedom. Now let me address the psychology of this because technique without mindset fails. Living on low income requires reframing your relationship with money and success. You have to stop measuring yourself against others. Comparison is the thief of contentment. And when you're living frugally, comparison will destroy you. Everyone around you appears to have more. Better cars, bigger homes, more vacations. What you don't see is their debt, their stress, their lack of savings, their fragility. You're seeing the surface while missing the foundation. Most people who look rich are broke. Most people who look modest are secure. Train yourself to ignore appearances. The only comparison that matters is you today versus you last year. Are you better off? Do you have more saved, less debt, more skills? That's progress. What your neighbor drives is irrelevant. This mindset shift is hard because humans are wired for social comparison. We evolved in small groups where relative status determines survival. B, in modern capitalism, that instinct is exploited to keep you spending. Marketers use it. Social media amplifies it. Everyone's trying to trigger your comparison instinct so you'll buy things to keep up. You have to consciously override this. Remind yourself daily that wealth is invisible. Real wealth is savings, investments, freedom, not possessions, not appearances, not Instagram posts. The richest people I know live modestly. They don't need to signal anything because they're actually secure. Let me give you another psychological principle: hedonic adaptation. Humans adapt to their circumstances incredibly quickly. You think a bigger house will make you happier. It will for about 3 months. Then it becomes your new normal and you want more. You think a nicer car will feel good. It does for a week. Then you stop noticing it. This is why lifestyle inflation is a trap. You're chasing a feeling that fades immediately, but the cost persists forever. The wise person understands this and refuses to play. They keep their lifestyle stable and let their income grow into savings. They know that the happiness from accumulation is temporary, but the freedom from savings is permanent. You're not depriving yourself by living on less. You're investing in future optionality. Every dollar you don't spend is a dollar that can work for you forever. That's not sacrifice, that's strategy. Now, let me talk about time. Living on low income often gives you something high income people lose: time. If you're not working 80 hours a week to maintain an expensive lifestyle, you have hours for things that matter. You can read, you can think, you can build skills, you can spend time with people you care about. This is the hidden advantage of low-income living. When your expenses are minimal, you don't need to maximize income at all costs. You can take a job that pays less but offers better condi. And you can work part-time. You can pursue projects that might not pay immediately but build long-term value. High-income people are often time poor. They're trapped in jobs they hate because they've built lifestyles that demand constant high income. Their golden handcuffs, nice, shiny, suffocating low expenses, create freedom. Not just financial freedom, but temporal freedom. You control your schedule because you're not desperate for every paycheck. That's valuable beyond measure. Let me give you a specific example. Two people, both 30 years old. Person A earns $80,000 and spends $75,000. Person B earns $35,000 and spends $25,000. Who's better off? Most people would say person A because higher income sounds better. But look at the gap. Person A saves $5,000 per year. Person B saves $10,000 per year. Person B is actually building wealth faster, despite earning less than half as much. After 10 years, person A has saved $50,000, person B has saved $100,000. If both invest at reasonable returns, person B will reach financial independence years before person A. That's the power of the gap. Income doesn't determine wealth. The spread between income and expenses determines wealth. You can be rich on $30,000 if you spend $20,000. You'll be broke on $200,000 if you spend $200,000. The math doesn't care about the absolute numbers. It only cares about the difference. This is why I tell people to focus on expenses first. Increasing income is good, but if you can't control spending, more income just means more waste. Fix the leak before you increase the flow. Get your expenses down to reasonable levels. Build the discipline to live within those constraints. Then if income grows, you'll actually benefit because you won't immediately inflate your lifestyle. Most people never learn this. They spend their entire lives increasing income and increasing expenses in lockstep. They die having earned millions and saved nothing. Don't be most people. Now, let me address the counter-argument. Some will say this is unrealistic, that modern life requires more money than I'm suggesting. that inflation has made low-income living impossible. That's nonsense. Yes, costs have risen. Yes, some things are more expensive, but the core principle hasn't changed. You can still live far below what you earn if you're willing to make trade-offs. The real issue isn't that it's impossible. It's that people don't want to make the trade-offs. They want the new car and the savings. They want the big house and the security. They want to impress people and be financially independent. You can't have both. Every choice is a trade-off. Low-income living is just making different trade-offs than the majority makes. You trade appearance for reality, comfort for security, short-term pleasure for long-term freedom. These aren't bad trade-offs. They're often better trade-offs, but they require you to think independently and act counter to social norms. Most people can't do that. Let me tell you about another benefit of low-income living: resilience. When your lifestyle is simple, you're anti-fragile. Economic downturns don't destroy you. Job loss doesn't devastate you. Unexpected expenses don't spiral into crisis. You've built a life that can withstand shocks. Compare that to someone living paycheck to paycheck on a high income. They're brittle. One bad month and they're in trouble. They have no margin, no flexibility, no reserves. They look successful, but they're one problem away from collapse. I'd rather be the person earning less with high savings than the person earning more with high expenses. Because when trouble comes, and it always does, the person with reserves survives. The person without them doesn't. This is basic risk management. You don't optimize for maximum comfort. You optimize for maximum resilience. Comfort is nice. Survival is non-negotiable. Low-income living done correctly prioritizes survival. Build such a strong foundation that nothing can shake you. That's real security, not the appearance of success, but the reality of stability. Let me also address the role of geography. Where you live matters enormously. If you're trying to live on low income in San Francisco or New York, you're fighting geography. The cost of basic necessities in expensive cities makes low-income living nearly impossible. The solution is obvious, but most people reject it. Move. Live somewhere cheaper. I know that's not popular advice. People have ties, connections, preferences. But if you're serious about living well on limited income, geography is a major variable. You can live on $30,000 a year comfortably in many parts of America. You cannot do that in Manhattan. The choice is yours. Stay in an expensive place and struggle, or move to a cheaper place and thrive. Most people choose struggle because they're attached to location. That's their prerogative, but they can't then complain that low-income living is impossible. It's impossible where they've chosen to live. Change the variable and the equation changes. This isn't defeatism, it's realism. You have to work within constraints. If geography is a constraint you're unwilling to change, you need to adjust other variables. Either earn more or accept less comfort. But don't pretend the math doesn't work. It works for anyone willing to make appropriate adjustments. Now, let me talk about the long game. Living on low income isn't the goal, it's the method. The goal is financial independence, the ability to live without depending on employment. Low-income living is how you get there faster than high-income spending ever will. Because every dollar you save is a soldier fighting for your freedom. Every dollar you spend is gone forever. If you can live on low income while investing the difference, you're building an army of dollars that will eventually earn enough to cover your living expenses. At that point, you're free. You work because you want to, not because you have to. That's the finish line. Most people never reach it because they spend everything they earn. They're stuck on the treadmill forever. But if you can embrace low-income living as a temporary strategy, you can reach independence in 10 or 15 or 20 years. That's a timeline most people never even consider because they're so focused on comfort now that they sacrifice freedom later. I made that trade consciously. I lived modestly when I could have lived lavishly. I invested aggressively when I could have consumed pleasurably. And by my 40 seconds, I had freedom that most people don't have at 70. That's not luck. That's compounding applied consistently over decades. You can do the same. The principles don't change. Live below your means, invest the difference, let time work. After enough years, the math is unstoppable. You'll have assets generating income. At that point, your low-income living skills become a superpower because your needs are so modest that even small investment returns cover them. Financial independence doesn't require millions if you've kept your expenses low. You might need 500,000, maybe less. That's achievable for almost anyone over a working lifetime if they're disciplined. Let me end with this. Low-income living isn't about poverty. It's about clarity. It's about understanding what you actually need versus what you've been conditioned to want. Once you strip away the nonsense, the required income is shockingly low. And once you realize that, you're free. Free from status anxiety, free from comparison, free from the treadmill. You can live on your terms, not society's. That's the goal. Not to be poor, but to be clear. Not to suffer, but to choose. Because when you master low-income living, you've mastered the fundamental skill of modern life. You've learned to be happy with enough. And enough, properly understood, is abundance. Now, let me give you the tactical execution plan, because philosophy without action is just entertainment. Most people understand these principles intellectually but fail at implementation. The difference between knowing and doing is discipline applied systematically. First, you need to audit your current spending, not estimate. Actually track. For 1 month, write down every single expense, every coffee, every subscription, every impulse purchase. The act of tracking changes behavior immediately because you can't hide from numbers on paper. Most people are shocked when they see where their money actually goes. They think they're being reasonable. The data says otherwise. Once you have the data, categorize everything: housing, transportation, food, entertainment, utilities, debt payments, subscriptions, miscellaneous. Now you see the battlefield. Now you know where the enemy is hiding. Next step is brutal triage. Which expenses are truly necessary? Not comfortable, not convenient, necessary. Can you survive without it? If yes, it's a candidate for elimination. Start with the easiest cuts. Cancel subscriptions you forgot existed. Stop buying lunch every day. Eliminate one streaming service. Small victories build momentum. Don't try to cut everything at once. That's unsustainable. Cut one category per month. This month, reduce food spending by cooking more. Next month, eliminate unnecessary subscriptions. Month 3, find cheaper car insurance. Sequential optimization beats perfectionist paralysis. For housing, if you're renting, move when the lease ends. Find something cheaper, even if it's less impressive. If you own and you're underwater on mortgage, that's or dear, but you can still reduce associated costs. Lower your thermostat. Eliminate cable. Stop paying for services you can do yourself. For transportation, if you have a car payment, that's the priority target. Can you sell the car and buy something cheaper with cash? Can you refinance at a lower rate? Can you increase your deductible to lower insurance premiums? Every dollar of fixed cost you eliminate is permanent monthly savings for food. Meal planning is non-negotiable. Sundays you plan the week. You make a shopping list. You buy only what's on the list. No impulse purchases, no convenience foods, raw ingredients only. The difference between planned shopping and impulse shopping is $50 to $100 per week. That's $200 to $400 per month. For someone on low income, that's transformative. Learn to cook basic meals. Rice and beans cost pennies per serving. Eggs are cheap protein. Vegetables in season are affordable. Chicken thighs are cheaper than breasts and more flavorful. You don't need fancy recipes. You need nutrition that costs nothing. For entertainment, embrace free. Libraries offer books, movies, music, internet access. Parks are free. Walking is free. Many museums have free days. Community events are free. You're only bored if you're boring. An active mind doesn't need purchase stimulation. For clothing, stop shopping unless something is literally unwearable. When you do need something, thrift stores and clearance racks, quality basics that last. One good pair of jeans is better than 5 cheap pairs. For social pressure, this requires explicit conversation. Tell your friends you're being intentional with money. Real friends will understand. People who pressure you to spend aren't friends. They're accomplices in your financial destruction. Suggest free activities, walks, home dinners, game nights. If they can't enjoy your company without spending money, they're in. OT worth your time. For debt, if you have high interest debt, that's your financial emergency. Every spare dollar goes to the highest interest debt first, not the smallest balance, not the most annoying, the highest interest rate. That's mathematics, not psychology. Pay minimums on everything except the highest rate debt. Throw everything extra at that. When it's gone, roll that payment to the next highest rate. This is the avalanche method. It's the fastest way out mathematically. For emergency savings, open a separate account. Set up automatic transfer, even $25 per month. You'll never see it. You won't miss it. After a year, that's $300. After 5 years, $1,500 plus interest. That's enough to handle minor emergencies without debt. The automation is crucial. If you have to manually transfer, you won't make it automatic, and it happens whether you remember or not. That's how you overcome your own weakness. For income, this has to be strategic. Can you work overtime? Can you take a second part-time job temporarily? Can you sell possessions you don't need? Every extra dollar from increased income should go to debt elimination or savings, not lifestyle inflation. This is the trap most people fall into. They earn more and immediately spend more. The entire point of increasing income is to increase the gap, not the spending. If you get a raise, maintain your current lifestyle. Redirect the entire raise to savings or debt. Your life doesn't get worse. Your future gets dramatically better. Now, let me address the psychological barriers because this is where most people fail. The tactics are simple. The execution is hard because your brain fights you. You have to understand your own psychology to succeed. First barrier is instant gratification bias. Your brain values immediate pleasure over future benefit. That's why you buy things now instead of saving for later. The salutio. N is to make future benefits tangible. Calculate exactly how much earlier you'll reach financial independence if you make this sacrifice. Real numbers, real timeline. When you see that skipping restaurant meals for a year means retiring 6 months earlier, the trade-off becomes clear. Second barrier is social comparison. You see others spending and feel poor by comparison. The solution is deliberate exposure management. Unfollow people on social media who trigger comparison. Spend less time with people whose lifestyles make you feel inadequate. Spend more time with people who share your values. Your environment shapes your behavior. If everyone around you is frugal, being frugal feels normal. If everyone around you is wasteful, being frugal feels like deprivation. Change the environment. Third barrier is decision fatigue. Every purchase is a decision. After enough decisions, you get tired and default to spending. The solution is systems that eliminate decisions. Automatic bill pay, automatic savings transfers, automatic investing, pre-planned meals, predetermined spending limits. The more you automate good behavior, the less you rely on willpower. Fourth barrier is rationalization. Your brain is incredibly good at justifying bad decisions. You'll tell yourself you deserve this purchase because you worked hard. You'll tell yourself it's educational even though you'll never use it. The solution is the 24-hour rule. Never buy anything the day you want it. Wait, if you still want it tomorrow after sleeping on it, maybe it's justified. But you'll be amazed how many desires evaporate overnight when reason returns. Fifth barrier is sunk cost fallacy. You've spent money on something, so you continue spending to justify the initial expense. Gym memberships you don't use, but won't cancel because you already paid. Subscriptions you maintain because you might use them someday. Titch. E-solution is ruthless honesty. Sunk costs are sunk. They're gone. The only question is future cost. If you're not using it, cancel it. The past doesn't matter. Only forward-looking optimization matters. Sixth barrier is stress spending. When you're anxious or sad, you spend to feel better. Shopping becomes emotional regulation. This is dangerous because emotions are frequent. The solution is alternative coping mechanisms. When you feel the urge to spend, go for a walk, call a friend, read, exercise, journal, anything that addresses the emotion without the financial cost. Over time, you rewire your brain to seek comfort in ways that don't destroy your finances. Now, let me give you the mindset that makes all of this sustainable. You're not depriving yourself, you're choosing freedom over stuff. Every time you don't spend, you're voting for your future self. That future self will thank you, but only if you make the right choices now. Think of your current self and your future self as different people. Current self wants pleasure now. Future self wants security. Your job is to mediate that conflict in favor of future self. Because future self can't defend themselves, they don't have a voice yet. You have to be their advocate. This reframing helps because it makes the trade-off explicit. Every purchase is a negotiation between present comfort and future freedom. When you frame it that way, the right choice becomes clearer. Another helpful mindset is thinking in terms of life energy. Money isn't just money, it's concentrated life energy. You traded hours of your life to earn it. When you spend, you're not spending money, you're spending the hours you work to earn it. Is this purchase worth 8 hours of work? Is this subscription worth 2 hours per month? When you convert money to time, wasteful spending becomes viscerally painful because you can feel the time being wasted. Finally, remember that this isn't forever. Low-income living is a temporary strategy to reach financial independence. Once you're there, you have options. You can spend more if you want, or you might discover you don't want to because you've learned that happiness doesn't come from spending. Most people who successfully live on low income and reach independence discover they don't want to inflate lifestyle. They've learned that enough is enough. They've experienced the peace of financial security. They're not willing to trade that for consumption. That's the ultimate victory. Not reaching a point where you can spend more, reaching a point where you don't want to because you've learned what actually matters. And what actually matters isn't things, it's freedom, time, relationships, purpose, growth, none of which require significant money. Once you learn that lesson, you're free in a way most people never experience. You've escaped the trap entirely. You're no longer playing the game. You've won by refusing to play. That's what living on low income teaches you. If you do it right,